Here we go. Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I. Now, I would like to say it was once again pointed out to me by a viewer in the UK that I might have been culturally appropriating the moniker the notorious RMB. So perhaps I should come up with something better. So for today's chat, I am the sanctimonious RMB. That's what I am for today. So for you imagination connoisseurs and all of you, the members of the Post-Geek Singularity community, I am no longer the RMB, the notorious RMB, at least for today. I am the sanctimonious RMB, which I think is relatively appropriate for this chat, relatively speaking. Now, I've got a number of great letters off the bat. First of all, for those of you who might be following me for a long time, well, all of these past few months, this is the 98th live Robservations chat, which means the 100th episode of this show is going to be on Easter Sunday. Now, I have a surprise for you. I have been told that Alan Murphy, the CEO of Lucky Tiger, the sponsor of this show, Lucky Tiger, for men who want to look good and feel great. Men's grooming products, Lucky Tiger men's grooming products, sponsor this show. But Mr. Murphy cannot be on the actual 100th episode of this show because it falls on Easter Sunday. And he's a man that wants to celebrate with his family, as everyone should. I'd like to think of you, members of the Post-Geek Singularity, as my family. So I am going to be here for my 100th show this Sunday at noon. You're going to see a few changes up here in this hizzle. I've got some great letters to read, including one from Willow Yang that actually kind of made me blush a little bit, but also made me sort of excited too. So I'm going to read that from her. And there's a lot of there's a two-part letter I'm going to read. But if you guys want to send me letters about your journey into fandom or anything else, please write me at my website, theburnettwork.net. And I want to thank Lucky Tiger for supporting this channel. And I especially am excited about having their CEO, Alan Murphy, on this show. It looks like on Monday. So that's going to be pretty exciting. We can grill him about his product line and all of those things. So as you know, I've decided to heed the words of the canonical characters at the end of Star Trek Discovery. And after this chat, I am never going to speak of Star Trek Discovery or its characters again, at least those that left our time period for 1,000 years or 950 years into the future, because that's what Spock wants me to do, and I'm happy to do it. I'm happy I heard from Spock himself not to ever talk about Michael Burnham or the Discovery ever again. But why not go out in a blaze of glory? So let me get right to these letters. And I got letters from people I hadn't heard from and a few recognizable faces. This letter comes from David Fetterman. Hi, Mr. Burnett. I have to say I really enjoy Robservations. My journey into nerddom started early. I say nerddom because I was informed by the younger generation I'm not a geek. I'm a nerd. I used to run home from school to watch Johnny Socko or Ultraman, depending on the day. My teen years, I spent my Saturday nights with Tom Baker and PBS. That's where I first saw The Prisoner, by the way, on PBS. Star Trek has always been a show close to my heart, my favorite series being Deep Space Nine. I wanted to let you know that listening to you speak about Star Trek Discovery makes me wish I didn't enjoy the show. I like the characters. I especially enjoyed the shorts they put out before season 2. Anyway, listening to you and pretty much agreeing with everything you dislike about the series got me to self-reflect on why I like the series. Well, more than that, it got me to reflect on why I seem to enjoy many movies, like the prequels, as well as well-crafted stories. Then you said something that hit home. You have a love for reading. I have tried many times to sit and read for enjoyment. For some reason, reading for enjoyment just doesn't work for me. I'm a much more visual person. I envy people that get enjoyment from literature. It took every fiber of my being to get through the Hitchhiker's Guide series of books. I have to say I like them, but I did not get the enjoyment you would expect. One thing I think you and I can agree with is Discovery is visually stunning. My mom used to tell me when I was a kid that I would watch turds dance across the screen. Imagine how special seeing Mr. Hanky for the first time was for me. Anyway, I just figured I would let you know there are Star Trek Discovery lovers. Oh my God, I'm not much for shortening things, but come on, referring to myself as an STD lover. LOL. Well, it's DSC, it's Discovery. I get it. Out there that respect and agree with your disgust, but just can't help but like it anyway. One last thing. Watching you and John Campea has inspired me. I recently started perusing a project that, if it fails, it's going to be the most fun I've ever had failing in my life. Thank you for everything you do in this post-Geek Singularity world we live in. Best regards, David Fetterman. David brings up a good point. Not everybody likes the same things. I understand reading, especially in this day and age where there's so much visual stimuli, and so much of it is, let's face it, we are surrounded by delicious eye candy everywhere we look. I mean, I even try and make this environment I'm sitting in full of delicious eye candy. I want to pick things up and play with them. There's so much stimulation around here. And while I just love to read, I love to read a lot. I have ever since I was a kid. I just love stories. I can totally understand that there are people that just aren't wired to read. I mean, I get it. And that, if you don't like to read, there's nothing wrong with that. If you enjoy consuming stories in other forms of media, no problem. I think that's great. What's interesting about what David said is he tried. It's not for him. He read the Hitchhiker's Guide books. I get it. And I understand there's a reason why there's a large contingent of people that like Star Trek Discovery, and I don't want to take that away from them. I've said that many times, and I really appreciate David sharing this letter with me, and I'm glad you're part of the Post-Geek Singularity. But what it reminded me of, I think, is what I'm really enjoying about this community that we're building here is people. I like the fact, if you disagree with me or don't like something that I've said, please tell me. Call me on it. That's what discussion's all about. It's like this gentleman in the UK that called me on saying the notorious R&B that I'm appropriating from Biggie Smalls. And, I didn't mean to do that. I'm a Biggie Smalls fan, but that's why today I'm the sanctimonious R&B. But I want to thank you guys for, even if you know that I don't like something that you like, please still reach out to me. I'm not going to ridicule you or mock you in any way. I want to discuss it. Let's talk about it. That's why we're here. Now, this next letter sort of has a thematic resonance. I mean, it's sort of it comes to me from someone, and they didn't want me to read this letter. And I don't want any of you thinking I'm not going to use this person's name, but I really liked this letter and I thought it was really worth sharing. So I am not going to say who wrote it to me, but I really liked it. And I thought with David's letter, I thought it sort of was a nice bookend to it. So, and I really like what it had to say. So I'm not going to use your name, but I am going to read the letter. If that's problematic for people, please tell me why. I figure I'll leave it anonymous, but if it's a good letter, it's a good letter. So I'm going to read it. This comes from Anonymous, but I want to say, if you're out there watching, thank you for this letter because it really meant a lot to me and I liked it. Hi, R&B. I hope you and Gilbert are well. I've been watching your Robservations for some time, but your latest chat, number 96, prompted me to write a comment here as I had a lot more to say than would fit on a YouTube comment. But before I get to that, allow me to give you a brief history of my interest in science fiction and fantasy. I've always been a bookworm, and so I've read widely. My love of science fiction started with reading classic books by Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke. My first science fiction TV show that I can remember watching completely was Star Trek Voyager. Yes, the show certainly had flaws, but I liked it enough to go back and watch all of the other Star Trek, though not all at once. After Enterprise ended, I returned to my first love of mystery novels until I was introduced to Babylon 5 years later. That reignited my love of science fiction. Currently, I'm watching Farscape, which I'm really enjoying. My love of fantasy came from reading the Dragon Riders of Pern series by Anne McCaffrey, which, by the way, I also read, which I got from the Science Fiction Book Club. The idea that you could have a telepathic bond with a dragon, combined with the world building that she did in those books, intrigued me. I also loved both the Harry Potter books and the Lord of the Rings movies. I haven't read much fantasy since then, but I'm looking forward to the Amazon Lord of the Rings series. With all that said, on to my comments on your recent live chat. Thanks for reading John Price's letter. Much of what he said about Discovery, I agree with. I have a BA in English, so I've read a lot of literature and I know a thing or two about literary theory. It seems that the writers of Discovery don't care about how to structure a story or even have coherence between episodes. I can overlook the visuals, but I can't overlook the underdeveloped characters and trope-filled nonsensical plots. That's why I will not be following what happens in season 3. I agree that the ability to believe in another world, even a fantastical one, makes a big difference. That's why Babylon 5 and The Expanse are such good shows to me. In Babylon 5, the station itself spins to create gravity because Earth does not have any artificial gravity technology. As well, the fact that all the various alien races have different levels of technology and ship designs makes sense because they all have a very different culture and history. When it comes to The Expanse, the fact that you can have to wear gravity boots on a ship or that the Belters are taller because they live in a low gravity environment compared to that of Earth or Mars made sense to me. But Discovery doesn't even try to be believable, which is sad, considering Star Trek used to be a show that had science advisors. I doubt Discovery has one. Based on your recommendation, I recently watched Metropolis. For a movie made in the 1920s, there were a lot of themes that seemed relevant today. The visuals were stunning. I watched the German remastered version. The score was great, and the message was interesting, if a little obvious. Though those workers should win an award for the worst parents ever. If I was one of those children, I would be annoyed that my parent left me to drown while they were dancing in front of a wrecked machine. I'll end this message with a book recommendation. The Power by Naomi Alderman is a great book. Essentially, the premise is that only women receive a dangerous power to hurt and kill, which changes society as we know it. It's thrilling and compelling at the same time. Please don't share this message with your viewers, but please do continue to provide thought-provoking insights into genre media. I'll be watching your channel, even if I don't comment or I miss the live chat itself. All the best. Well, listen, I want to thank you. I hope you don't mind me reading that letter. I thought that was a great letter. It talked about, again, verisimilitude, the idea that when you're creating, somebody wrote me on one of the comments on YouTube yesterday that I was using the light speed breakaway factor that we saw in the first season of Star Trek that was later used in Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, as an example of something that's realistic, that I could believe in. And they're like, it's hogwash, it's pseudoscience, it's ridiculous. Why do you believe in that? Well, here's the thing. The reason that I believe in that, all science fiction is pretty much hogwash. And it's just, you got to make it believable by putting in enough. You got to take a viewer at least somewhat of the way to believe in what's going on and create. World building is very important to these fictional universes. And of course, a lot of it is pseudoscience. I mean, dragons aren't real. They were never real, not even in our prehistoric times were there ever fire-breathing dragons. However, if they're presented in such a way, and if they're visualized in such a way, like the dragons say on Game of Thrones are, or lo and behold, Dragon Slayer, the 1981, no, 82, 81, 82, Dragon Slayer, a movie I adored as a kid that I was like, where is this Blu-ray? It is actually streaming on Amazon Prime in HD. It's a gorgeous transfer. Again, a Paramount movie like War of the Worlds that you cannot get on physical media, but it is available. I recommend it. Had one of the great dragons, still one of the great dragons ever put on screen, the Vermithrax Pejorative, done by ILM with their Go Motion process that they pioneered for Empire Strikes Back, which is basically doing traditional stop motion animation, but adding motion blur between the frames so it doesn't look as herky-jerky. And Dragon Slayer had one of the greatest examples of that. So this letter really touched on world building and how important it was, and also because it's about someone who loved reading as opposed to the previous letter, a fan and a viewer that doesn't love reading so much. But both are welcome here in the Post-Geek Singularity. And I want to thank you for this letter. I hope you don't mind me reading it aloud. I didn't use your name. I thought it was a great letter. So thank you again. Now we're going to have some more letters that are staying on topic. Now this comes from CM Daniels. This is a good one. And I love this. I don't believe CM Daniels has written to me before. I didn't recognize his email or her email address. I'm not sure. CM. This is a great letter. Well, I'll let you be the judge of that. Mr. Burnett, in the wake of last night's nonsensical finale to Star Trek Discovery, I wanted to share some thoughts that might not be seen by more than a few people, save yourself and a trickle of others, from your fantastic show number 96. I'm not quite sure how I'd rework this into a letter, so I thought I'd just cut and paste the thread instead. You've got my full permission to read what I've written, especially because as I wrap my long final response with, "But it's just a TV show, right?" after explaining how so-called mindless entertainment does influence how we become who we are. Thanks for such fantastic discourse on fandom. CM Daniels. Oh, he has a YouTube handle. His YouTube handle is, let me just spell it. It's ALUVRIANNE_IMICARA. So, Princess Mike is an astrophysicist. Fine. Riddle me this, though. How does an astrophysicist suddenly become the person in charge of xenoanthropology? I can tell you, as a true-to-life real anthropologist of the forensic biological variety, that anthro and astrophysics are two very different disciplines that one does not simply jump between. I wouldn't dream of showing up at NASA and waving my professional credentials as a medical death investigator around and start telling everyone, is it medical legal? Oh, it's a medical legal. As a medical legal death investigator around and start telling everyone about the stars. I know that Star Trek is famous for taking liberties with the science they show on screen. But in all honesty, this series and Princess Mike have made a mockery of what astrophysicists and anthropologists spend years and years of their lives studying to do. I could no sooner become a plumber tomorrow as I could be an astrophysicist. But when you're a Mary Sue, the not Vulcan, I don't suppose it matters. Response 1 from John Price. I know, right? There's nowhere in my anthro books about being a computer scientist. My response. John Price, don't even get me started on their inability to distinguish chromosomal and mtDNA. Arg! As the super bestest, most awesome anthropologist to have ever existed, Princess Mike doesn't have to worry about any of these tiny trivialities. But then, I'm only a real scientist, so what do I know? Response 2 from Kick Coben. Princess Mike, toxic fandom will never cease to amaze. Only a TV show, remember? The Latin percolating haterade for our black lead character rises to the surface yet again. Which I like because this is the person that told me not to use notorious R&B. My response, Kikoben, I'm a queer woman of color. The exact audience this show is marketed to. And I find Princess Mike, not SMG, an obnoxious, tokenistic, utterly unlikable Mary Sue, whose only saving grace is that, nope, I still can't find one in the supposed representation of me, who even shares the same real-life career as I do. This character should be my idol, really, and it's one of my wishes that this show goes full Saint elsewhere. Princess Mike, representing women of color scientists, make us look incompetent. She's an angry, insubordinate, insufferable know-it-all, and women of color scientists who have to work even harder to be taken seriously in their fields do not need this character associated with us. In a culture so heavily saturated in pop culture and sub-niches like the sciences, where 90% of everyone you encounter is a sci-fi fan of some flavor, you'll find that supervisors and coworkers mentally sort others, as humans are wont to do, into categories. There are the Kirks, Spocks, and McCoys, or the Hans, the Lukes, the Leias. These are positive associations with personality types that are proven as hardworking, trustworthy overall, personable, and realistically flawed, the kind of people you want to work for and with. No one wants to work for or associate with Princess Mike, Silly Tilly, or Screechy Stamets. No one wants to be associated with these personality types because when Princess Mikes occur in the land of real science, that's how Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos happen. Man, I love this letter. Scientists and engineers, we especially can't escape the connotations of pop culture and fandom in our lives. How many times have I told people what I do, only to have the inevitable Bones, CSI, Dexter comparison immediately pop out of people's mouths? How many people, like a dear friend of mine, say they're engineers and instantly hear, "Beam me up, Scotty"? For some of us, these aren't just TV shows, and they can and do have an influence on how we are perceived in professional and personal capacities, whether we want them to or not. These shows are what get a lot of people interested in the careers and hobbies they eventually adopt as adults. Mr. Spock and Quincy Emmy are the reasons I started thinking about a career in science when I was a child. I am who I am today, a professional medical legal death investigator, a genuine scientist, because of two programs that are only TV shows. Remember? The number of scientists, engineers, and military officers I know who were influenced by Star Trek are many. A pharmacist, a geologist, a Boeing ergonomic engineer, two computer scientists, a medical biochemist, a major in the U.S. Army, and a buddy from my forensic anthro graduate program, an aerospace engineer, a captain in the U.S. Army, 3 physicians, a physiotherapist, and at least 2 mathematicians, just to name a few. Princess Mike's, above all, makes science and engineering unappealing for youth. We're cramming STEM education down kids' throats these days, and unless these careers are successfully modeled for them, interest wanes. Regardless of sex, gender, race, or sexual orientation, people don't want to be around or work for Princess Mike, Silly Tilly, and Screechy Stamets. Children are a lot more understanding of personalities and social hierarchies than adults give them credit for. If they make associations that these careers are going to put them in direct contact with people like this, or worse, they will turn into people like this, they're going to become something else instead. And that is a massive loss for society as a whole. But it's just a TV show, right? CM Daniels, I don't think, first of all, now I understand who you are, and I really appreciate you being so honest. I don't think I've ever come across such a succinct and clear-headed explanation of why these things matter. Why does Star Trek matter? And I don't think I've ever read such a takedown of why I feel Discovery is such a dangerous, horrible bastardization of not just Star Trek, but of pop culture entertainment in general. I mean, I don't think there's anything more that I could say that could spell it out. As a matter of fact, I would like to put this letter on my website, sort of as a manifesto given to me by a member of the Post-Geek Singularity about why I've believed that science fiction, fantasy, and horror can matter to people, and why it matters that it's taken seriously. And what a wonderful, wonderful letter you've sent me. I can't thank you enough for it. And you know, I couldn't have said it better myself. And you obviously speak from a position of authority. By the way, heck, I loved Quincy when I was a kid. And, you know, CSI was sort of annoying, but I love mystery novels and I loved forensic pathology. The more, the better. And one of the things that I love, one of the subsets of mystery fiction, because I read a lot of it, I love a great serial killer book with great forensics in it. So again, maybe I should have you as a guest on the show to talk about this stuff for real. But thank you again for this letter. Wow. What a damning indictment. And I couldn't have said it better myself. And for the record, this to me is not haterade. You know, this is very cogent, well-reasoned, and explains a great deal about how important a show like Star Trek can be. How many people got into the fields that CM discusses because of Star Trek, and how many people won't? I mean, my God, to think that Star Trek Discovery might turn people off from going into a career in the sciences, that's something I never even considered. What a fantastic letter, CM. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for being so honest. Again, if you guys want to write me, please send letters to theburnetwork.net, because, man, the more I get, I'm just blown away by you guys. You know, I have been put, I guess I put myself in a position of great privilege to have letters like these, all of your letters, sent to me. Whether it's your journeys of fandom or whether it's a letter like CM's, it just shows how wildly diverse and interesting the Post-Geek Singularity can be, and it grows every day. Amazing. Here's another letter, a different change of pace, but on the same subject matter, from Noel Ryan, who's written before. Hello, Rob. Hope you're well. I'm pleased I was able to catch your show live the other day and contribute. Hopefully, we'll do so again. Well, thank you, Noel. I was going to write this letter talking about Star Trek Discovery and toxic fandom, but instead, I thought I would tell you about something more positive, my first and only Star Trek convention. I have been to a few Star Trek exhibitions before, back in 2002, and there was an exhibition in London that had lots of props from various Star Trek shows, including many from the then upcoming Star Trek Nemesis. A few years later, on a trip to NASA in Florida, I was lucky to come across a small Star Trek exhibit that had a recreation of the original series Enterprise bridge. The joy of being able to just sit in the captain's chair was a childhood dream come true. It was in 2012 that I finally went to Destination Star Trek, a new event at the time that was billed as having all the captains at the show. How could I not go? I was a little apprehensive, as although a big fan of Star Trek, it was never something I necessarily shared with anyone, apart from my family. And to me, most people I knew thought Star Trek was, oh, that show with Dr. Spock with the pointy ears. Luckily, I had a family friend who was also a Star Trek fan, so he booked up to go to the convention. So we arrived at the location, a large exhibition center in East London. On the train, as we got near, I began to see many people with Star Trek uniforms casually riding the train. I remember thinking if I was making a mistake and maybe I should not go. My apprehension went away as soon as I entered the building. Yes, some people were dressed up and looked a bit funny, but for the most part, they were just normal people like me who shared a passion for this great show and its wonderful history. I won't go into every little detail, but I will just say the highlights of the day was meeting the great William Shatner, Patrick Stewart, and Kate Mulgrew, and getting to interact with some great people. I remember thinking, what a great experience it was, and how wonderful it was that all these other people around me loved what I loved and could share in it. Sometimes when people around you don't have the same passion for something that you have, you can feel like you're not quite normal, or that maybe you shouldn't be so passionate about that particular thing. I guess that's why I enjoy watching and listening to your show, as it's great to be around people who just share in the same passions as you do. My letters are often long, so I will leave it at that. Please, as always, feel free to use my letter as you wish. Sincerely, Noel Ryan. Well, Noel, once again, another great letter. Thank you. And, I've loved Star Trek my whole life. I've been unapologetic and unabashed in my love of the series. So hearing, your love, it's great. I mean, I love these stories about how people came to fandom, how people have cultivated their fandom over the years. I mean, I've never been ashamed. I've worn my fandom on my sleeve or on my chest or wherever it was. I've never been afraid to share it. And for the most part, it hasn't been detrimental in my life. But again, a great letter, and again, celebrating the love of Star Trek. And this next letter does as well. And this is another great letter. And this one comes from Angela Dashner. Dear Rob, I was thinking today on April 19th that it has been 20 years since my mom passed away. And I just finished watching Star Trek The Wrath of Khan, one of her favorites. Found myself crying once again when Spock died, even though I know he comes back. But every time I see that scene with Kirk and Spock's hands held up together, it does it to me. And each year that somehow gets me through the grief of spending these last 20 years without my mother. It just makes me want to say how fortunate I was to have a parent that always encouraged me to be a geek. I grew up watching Star Trek reruns in the 1970s. She always took the time each week to sit down and watch Wonder Woman with Linda Carter. It was our time together. I was just 11 years old and I couldn't wait then. And just a few years later, I got to watch The Bionic Woman with Lindsay Wagner. Me too. She always took time with my two brothers to watch their favorite shows like The Twilight Zone and, of course, The $6 Million Man. And we all watched, including my dad, the reruns of Star Trek. The first movie they took us to was Logan's Run because my mom loved Michael York. My mom took me there too. I just thought the movie looked cool. Then came Star Wars, which she did not want to go to, but she took me anyway. Thinking today what an awesome mom I had, and when I sat in the theater and watched the new Wonder Woman, it made me so proud to have such a great mom who exposed me to the classics, the arts, books, and so much more. I wished she could be right there beside me to see those great movies, and that great movie, meaning Wonder Woman. She would be counting down the days for Endgame. Like me, I just know it. I know this is long, but somehow I know this is long, but someone asked about raising your kids in this new age. I followed in my parents' footsteps. I always bought my sons comic books and graphic novels, and like my parents, have shared the classics and my love of the arts and books. When they were growing up, we also had a weekly date night. We would watch Star Trek: The Next Generation. Then they could pick an old episode of Star Trek or The Twilight Zone or Wonder Woman or whatever they wanted. And we would end our night with Stargate SG-1, which they both loved, especially the first two seasons on Showtime. I can't tell you how many midnight movies we went to, anything they wanted to see, superheroes, science fiction, one of our favorites, Lord of the Rings. So yes, you can raise your kids if they love geek stuff. My kids are now 30 and 32, and we can't wait to call each other as soon as we've seen the latest movie to have our movie discussion. The best treat is when we all are together at Christmas, so we can all go see some great new releases again. It may be a geek film, but now that they are older, it could be something like The Wolf of Wall Street. Boy, did that spark some discussions. I saw Wolf of Wall Street. I saw the first show on Christmas Day. I went by myself. Loved it. Counting down to Endgame, I can hardly wait, and I wish that it would get here. We won't be together, but for my son from Boston and I, already have our phone time planned out after we both have seen the movie to have our discussion of what we thought. By the way, I saw Shazam and the movie did not work, and the word verisimilitude comes up. Man, once again, you and I park our space shuttles in the same hangar. I haven't seen Discovery, so I can't comment on the latest Star Trek. I refuse to pay for a channel for a show that just doesn't look that good. I didn't mind how the '09 characters were played by the new cast, but the storyline I was not crazy about, and it just didn't make sense to me once the real Spock showed up. And after that, the other movies went downhill. But my kids do like them, so I've watched them more than I may have chosen to. Always trying to keep an open mind, I guess. And on that note, thank you, Rob, for all that you do for creating this great space for people to have discussions and keep an open mind in a safe and courteous way. I think it's kind of ironic my husband's name is also Rob. He's a great guy, too. That comes from Angela Dashner. Angela, thank you for that. And again, I love hearing stories about how do parents navigate those geek waters, because I myself never had kids, and I would like to know what that's like. I just actually clicked off. There's one last letter I want to read that I can't. It's very pertinent to this discussion. And oh, here it is. I got to say, I was going to end with this. I plan on ending with this letter. Maybe I shouldn't. But anyway, this one comes from Logan George. Here it comes. Revised and corrected text of previously sent message. Well, the finale of Disco was one of the most hilarious things I've ever seen. I'm laughing the way Data laughed when Q gave him that gift. So let me get this straight. Georgiou kills Control by magnetizing the spore chamber, thus alleviating any need or reason to send Discovery to the future. But they go to the future anyway. For reasons? Insert Data laugh. Starfleet has questions, But they all lie, and we must never discuss Discovery and Michael ever again. I'm actually down with this. I never want to discuss it again. And number one's name is number one. I get it. It's a cheeky joke. Someone says Pike, or someone called her Una at one point. I'll have to check. Una has been a suggested name in lore. I would have named her Commander Majel Hudak. I liked the last 5 minutes because it was all about the Enterprise. Spock shaved, his science station was cool, his wig sucked, and his face really isn't Spock-like. He does look better bearded. Nice closing with Pike, Spock, and number one. Where's Dr. Boyce? Love the cage-like shot through the dome going outside the ship. So that last signal is some 50,000 light years away, but visible with the naked eye from Earth orbit. So much for long-range sensors seeing it. If it's visible to the eye, that means the disco jumped 50,000 years into the past, not 950 years in the future, where Kurtzman, the idiot, says season 3 will take place, but he doesn't know anything about physics. But I felt joy seeing the disco vanish. I even liked Burnham's 2001 and Interstellar homage wormhole voyage. I loved Spock saying everything about Discovery needs to be classified, not discussed under penalty of treason. That should be a rule for all of us going forward. It should be a law passed by Congress in real life. That would have been a good series finale. Cancel this crap fest. I don't care about them living 950 years in the future. I'm not watching. I'm ending All Access. I don't care about Picard at this point. Based on the closing scenes, I'd love a Pike show, as would everyone else on the internet. But they need Manny Cotto, Ira Bear, and or J. Michael Straczynski to run it, and not do season arcs, but do episodes, episodically, like Trek is meant to be. And, visiting other planets, boldly going, etc. Enterprise Style 3 partners. Enterprise Style 3 parters, max. And bring back freelancers. The writer's room system is not working. Specs and freelance pitches were the lifeblood of great Star Trek stories. And get science fiction writers, the present-day equivalents of Harlan Ellison, Ted Sturgeon, Robert Bloch, Richard Matheson, and George Clayton Johnson. Where's the D.C. Fontana or the Melinda Snodgrass for this era of Trek? Bring in Ron Moore or other Battlestar Galactica writers for a Pike series. Save Star Trek from these morons. P.S. I agree with your love of Wings of Desire. I have it on DVD, and I've been meaning to get the Criterion Blu-ray. Peter Falk rules. I'm a Columbo fanatic. P.P.S. I'm wearing my new Lad Company t-shirt that I purchased, thanks to you letting me know they exist. Obviously, Blade Runner and 2001 are my two favorite movies. Proud to own both in 4K, along with Blade Runner 2049. That letter comes from Logan George, and that ends the letters for today. Let me just say that these two letters that express discontent with Star Trek Discovery, they said it as well as I could. I hate this show. I really do. As a 53-year, I haven't watched Star Trek for 53 years, but as it's 53 years old this year. As a Star Trek, I guess, disciple, I've always been uplifted, and I've always the person I am today really was, as CM said, I was shaped by pop culture. I really was, and probably as a child, I was shaped by specifically Star Trek and Twilight Zone to a certain extent. The Outer Limits. Later, UFO, The Prisoner, and a lot of other shows, but those were pretty much my. Those are the Grail shows that I watched. They were my holy grail. They were the shows that made me inquisitive and made me want to be interested in science, be interested in the world, but most of all, be interested in people. One of the things science fiction shows taught me was a love of people, was a love of human beings, a love of my fellow human beings. Now, again, I will say, if people like Star Trek Discovery, I think that's great. I do not judge them, and I'm not going to put them down. There's going to be people that Star Trek Discovery is the only Star Trek show that they've ever watched. And I'm also very aware of the fact that Star Trek debuted in 1966. Our civilization has moved on. Pop culture has certainly moved on. And, if you were born after a certain time, it's going to be very difficult for you to watch the original series unless you have the skill of going back and forgetting what you've already seen. It's really hard. And I've said this many times. If you grew up in a world where you've seen Jurassic Park, I say this all the time. When you grew up in a world with photorealistic dinosaurs, or you grew up in a world with special effects like The Matrix, it's very difficult to go back and watch classic science fiction because the methodology by which we consume cinema, television, and movies has changed. I mean, a lot of people who are younger than me might not remember, but when MTV and music videos they were a huge thing. MTV became huge, especially amongst younger people. I think I never turned it off in most of the 80s. Cinematic technique changed. Faster cutting, cinematography changed. If you go back and you watch movies, say before MTV, what was it? It was 81 or 80 that MTV debuted. By the way, if you want to read a great book, there's a book called I Want My MTV, which is an oral O-R-A-L. Oh, not oral, but an oral history of MTV told by people that were involved. One of the most wildly entertaining books I've ever read, and it's a perfect bathroom read because it's all people talking, it's all intercut. It's fantastic. But the actual mode, filmmaking really changed. Editorial styles changed, and throughout the 80s, and we see it resonates even today, filmmaking really did change. And people realized that fast cutting, especially in action cinema, you could change the whole way people consumed movies. You could literally, like in Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash, one of my favorite books, which talks about rewiring the brain. I'll tell you what happened to me when I first started working with an Avid, which is the nonlinear editing system. It was the first. I mean, there was an Edit Droid, but Avid was the first nonlinear editorial system I was able to get a hold of. And I learned it in 1995. I started editing on Avid in 95. And like, if you know about Snow Crash, it really did rewire my brain. It really did change how I thought of film. And before then, I mean, I started editing movies when I was a little kid on Super 8. I was literally cutting Super 8 film and taping it together. Then I started editing on video systems, whether it was my VHS, starting with my VHS, and then later with 3/4 inch and Digibetacam and things like that. My first feature that me and Peter Billingsley from A Christmas Story, the first feature I ever worked on, I only get an additional editor credit, but Peter Billingsley and I recut that entire film, was Full Moon's Arcade. And we cut the entire movie on a 3/4 inch system. So even then, we had to think linearly. One shot came after another. And if we wanted to change something, it was a monumental pain in the ass. But with nonlinear editing, I started changing how I thought about movies. Because you could zip from the beginning of a movie to the end of a film instantaneously at the speed, literally at the speed of thought, or however you could punch keys. And that really changed how editors could think about movies, because it removed if you wanted to make a change, I don't care how good of an editor you were, if you wanted to go back and take apart and edit, it was physical. You know, you had to literally take out the tape and recut something. But being able to do it digitally at the speed of thought totally changed and freed up what an editor was able to do. And I think the late 90s, I edited a lot of feature films, none that you've ever heard of, except maybe my own Free Enterprise, because it made it possible for me as a single individual. I could edit a film by myself. I didn't need an assistant, and I didn't work with an assistant, which is a big pain in the ass. But the independent films that I was editing back in the late 90s, I was doing everything myself. And I was also then post-supervising them, taking them through the negative cut stage, which we don't even have anymore, unless you're Christopher Nolan or Quentin Tarantino. But things were definitely, it was a different time. But the way I thought about movies changed. And because of MTV, the way movies were shot, the way movies were edited, the way movies were conceived. Michael Bay famously said, I don't know if he still has his website, but it was like he would shoot for the edit. That's what he would say. He would run 8 cameras or 10 cameras, and he came out of the music video commercial explosion of the 80s and 90s, mostly the 80s. And he was with Propaganda Films, the same people that represented. It was an agency that represented like David Fincher, and all of these guys were coming out of music videos. And David Fincher worked even at ILM on Return of the Jedi, believe it or not. So filmmaking changed. So I understand that people's perceptions of pop culture also change. And audiences today have grown up in a world where media is very different. If you grew up watching movies of the dawn of I mean, I would say that Metropolis is the demarcation point for my love of cinema. It was 1927 and 1927 on. So I have a very limited knowledge of silent films, which I've always sort of regretted. But I watched as a kid the evolution because I loved Universal monster movies that were made in the 30s. I loved noir movies in the 40s, and I first started watching. Hitchcock started making movies in the 30s, and actually he might have gone back even to the 20s, I think, to be honest. And so movies have changed. So I understand why people would love Star Trek Discovery. It's very modern in its conception in terms of how it's shot, but again, it has no connection at all to literary science fiction, nor does it have much of a connection to Star Trek. And the letters that I received today kind of sum that up, which is why I really dislike the show, because as CM said, I think it's actually detrimental in the long run to our culture as a whole, because anything that is dumb, that is monumentally dumb. When I was watching that show last night, and please write in and tell me, when I was watching Discovery and Michelle Yeoh, by the way, my favorite thing about last night's Discovery was Michelle Yeoh and Control having that knockdown drag out. But I think that of all the action scenes I've ever seen Michelle Yeoh in, and I've been watching her for 30 years, the scenes of her fighting in Star Trek Discovery have been the worst shot and directed. It's unbelievable. But I love seeing her kick Control's ass. And when she finally destroyed Control, I was sitting there going, oh. And why Admiral Cornwall pulled a lever and didn't get an emergency beam out? Did anyone not see the last 50 years of Star Trek, when at the last minute, gentlemen, bring me aboard, like, hey, end a doomsday machine. Last couple seconds, Admiral Cornwall just things, and Pike watches her die. I mean, I watch these shows and astromech droids on the surface of the Enterprise. I mean, it was just, anyway. I'm glad Discovery is gone. I really am. And into the future, I just don't care. And what it's insulting to me as a viewer when we have such great television, it's insulting to me that I have to watch such bad storytelling. And where I'm asking myself, and this idea that they only show these Starfleet officers at the end saying, oh, we're never going to talk about Discovery anymore. Really? Well, what about the Klingon Empire? If I were the Klingon Empire, I'd be like, yeah. Why don't we use the time crystals and go 950 years in the future and go bring Discovery back and plunder its technology? I mean, the end of season 2 of Discovery was antithetical to everything I, as a lover of books and a lover of great storytelling, I just was like, huh. It was so monumentally brain dead and stupid. And I'll say that right now. And this is not me being a hater. I don't hate the fact. It's not hate. It's actually, it is hate. To be honest, you're wrong. I'm hating on it because it's detrimental to the people that watch and like this show, and they can. They're missing out on what CM said. They're missing out on being given. We are owed good storytelling, especially you're paying for the privilege. Star Trek was free. Remember, Star Trek that you used to have was beamed over the airwaves for free, and we're paying for this. We're paying for it. We deserve better. People that love great storytelling deserve better. People that love Star Trek deserve better. We deserve better. But that's why this is going to be my last time ever talking about Discovery, ever. I never have to talk about it ever again. Although, I might go on. It's funny because I get criticized for why do you cuddle up to people like Midnight's Edge, or why do you like Doomcock, or why do you like Nerdrotic? Because I think ultimately, here's the thing. First of all, Midnight's Edge, Doomcock, and Nerdrotic, we're all coming from the same place. We love Star Trek, and we want Star Trek to be good. We want it to be good. We're hoping that it can be good. But the people that are in charge of Star Trek, it's not that they don't care. They want to make something that's good. They do. But they just don't know how to do it. They don't. And I'm not sitting here saying, oh, I am the person that knows how. I don't know how. My extent of working in television was directing 5 episodes of a Skinamax show. a couple of which I'm very proud of. We had to make those in 3 days. But, I've worked in a capacity as a producer for motion pictures at major studios and things like that. Uh, I worked in story analysis and development for years. And I certainly know a lot about Star Trek. And I think, there's any number of Star Trek novels. There's probably 10 great Star Trek novels that anybody who is read Peter David's New Frontier series. Peter David wrote or read the Star Trek Vanguard series. There's a number of Star Trek novels that have it all laid out there. It's all there. I mean, heck, I work with a Star Trek novelist and television writer named Jeffrey Thorne, and that was born out of a discussion Chris McQuarrie and Brian Singer and I had, and we created a pitch document called Star Trek Federation. It's on the internet. You can get it. We created that document in 2006. And Jeffrey Thorne has come on. He's gone on to write Star Trek Titan novels. He's a great writer. He's also had a great career in television. Jeff Thorne wrote this document for Star Trek Federation. And interestingly, our idea for Star Trek Federation was to set it 1,000 years in the future. In the year 3000, actually. Just a thought. You should check it out. And we were going to go pitch it, but then J.J. Abrams was announced as the new custodian of the Star Trek franchise, but didn't happen. Anyway, I just want great stories well told. I want rich characters. I want characters that I can look up to and admire. That's all. And I want great stories and great characters out of Star Trek. And I'll tell you something. I haven't seen last night's episode of The Orville, but last week's episode of The Orville, when you find out that the Mocklins there's the landscapers are outside for the apartment building across the street. The Mocklins, you know what? Just go watch last week's episode of The Orville. To me, it was a great episode of the show, and it was a great Star Trekian story. And if you really want to watch a great episode of Star Trek, go back to the season 2 Blu-rays. Get the season 2 Blu-rays and watch Melinda Snodgrass's episode, The Measure of a Man. The Measure of a Man, and on the Blu-ray, there's the extended version. It's the only extended version of Star Trek that exists. It's 13 minutes longer. It was created specifically for the Blu-ray. Watch that episode, and you will see how basically an episode of Star Trek, which takes place in a room, can be far more riveting than an entire season of Star Trek Discovery. Anyway, as our last letter, as Logan pointed out, they don't even know when you're sending a signal from the future, unless I guess it's a signal that was sent back through time using time crystals. But even then, it's hard for me to watch and go, wait a minute. Thank you, Logan, for pointing out so eloquently. And what I was thinking, it was truly, in my mind, a low point in Star Trek history. And people say this season was better than last season. I don't think so. I think this season was last season was different because it was a bastardization of the 13 original outlines they had under Brian Fuller's reign for the show. They took what was there and they bastardized it. So that was that. At least that was sort of a twisted, warped vision. It was kind of like, I just got The Manitou on Blu-ray from 1977, William Girdler's movie, The Manitou, based on Graham Masterton's novel. I got it from Shout Factory or Scream Factory. And it's kind of about Misquamacus, this Indian medicine man. He comes out of the back of Susan Strasberg, but he's all deformed because he was shot with an X-ray and that made him deformed. The first season of Star Trek Discovery was like Misquamacus, the medicine man in The Manitou. He was going to be this virile Manitou that came or the Misquamacus, this virile spirit that came back to life. But because he was X-rayed, he woke up deformed and came back. That's kind of what happened the first season of Star Trek Discovery. They took Brian Fuller's original outlines and they were deformed. That's what happened to the show. This show was just supremely dumb and awful. This season, I mean. And again, it's bad science fiction and it's bad television. And that's just my opinion, but I'm not going to talk about it anymore. I love hearing you guys talk about it. That doesn't mean I won't read letters from people about Star Trek Discovery, but we're owed better. And I really hope I'll tune into the Picard series. I will. I've heard a lot of not on Midnight's Edge and not on Nerdrotic and not on any of Doomcock's channels, but I've heard before they started talking about the Picard series, The problem is, when you're trying to change Star Trek into something which else that it isn't, which is what they've tried to do. Let's try and make it mainstream. Let's try and make it appeal to the masses. All of these alterations have taken away from what Star Trek is. And it's turning, this new Picard show looks to not be Star Trek. As I said, what an opportunity to get Patrick Stewart, because when we finished the Star Trek The Next Generation documentaries in 2014, Patrick Stewart said there was no reason to bring Star Trek back. There was certainly no reason to bring Picard back unless they had a great idea. They've obviously enticed him to come back. But it would be interesting to see a very thoughtful, very, it seems to me, I'm going to, you know what? I will defer judgment until I see the Picard show. That's all I'm going to say, because I want to give it a chance. I want to love the Picard show. I do. I want it to be great. I don't want it to be disappointing. I really, really, really want to love the Picard show. More than you could possibly know, actually. I want it to be great. But now, those letters just said it better than I ever could. So I am going to read. Wow, there's a lot of chats coming in. I'm going to start reading your letters because, man, I'll stay here as long as you guys want today. Sky Amazing Guy says, Rob, my first job was working at my local movie theater. I was there for over 3 years, and I swear I could write a sitcom of some of the experiences I had. That's not a bad idea. No one's ever done that. I'd watch that show. Fred Hensley says, all hail the sanctimonious RMB. Make it so. Hashtag make it so. Hashtag so say we all. Got to be sanctimonious. I figured if I'm not going to be the notorious R&B, how can I be the sanctimonious R&B? First of all, the guy that called me that also seems to think that he called me out by saying I had some problem with a black lead in Star Trek. Nothing could be further from the truth, by the way. I as I've said before, my first crush in the world was on Nichelle Nichols, Lieutenant Uhura, and especially by the time we get to Mirror Mirror, you didn't come back when she's doing that thing with Sulu. Man, I didn't even know the difference between white and black people when I was a kid, or yellow people or brown, whatever color people were. I didn't see it. I didn't learn about it until later. I was just like, I thought Nichelle Nichols was hot, and she was indeed. I was correct, and it's interesting to me that being a Star Trek lover, being a Deep Space Nine lover, it's strange to me that when people talk about, Michael Burnham being the first black lead on a Star Trek show, what? It's just I don't get that criticism. I don't get that criticism. I even have a Jet magazine somewhere that I bought with Avery Brooks on the cover. Just like I have Transgender Quarterly, not because I myself am going to become trans, or am I confused. I do not have any kind of gender dysmorphia. I just thought it was great that a magazine like Transgender Quarterly put Star Trek on the cover and put Dax on the cover. I thought that was really interesting. I have that magazine somewhere as well. It's crazy when I hear that. Like, really? Do you really believe that about me? Well, I don't know. Mark C says, because I'd love to see it, Gary at Nerdrotic has expressed interest in a Star Trek discussion with you. Getting YouTube's best Star Trek fans and pundits together for a discussion would be amazing. I tweeted to somebody today, if Gary at Nerdrotic and I ever teamed up and did a Star Trek show, I'd have to either go in and talk to a cardiologist and get an MRI, however they check the health of your heart valves. I'd probably have to go on or do that first to make sure that my cardiovascular health was good. Because if I didn't, I might not be here. Vegetable Tube says, what if Star Trek Discovery for next season writes the mycelial network is the Borg origin, aka Sporgs, and introduces the U.S. manifest next season? Will this be better? No, no, it would not be better. It would not. Cardinal Sin asks, this is a good question. By the way, Vegetable, thank you for the great support for the channel. I very much appreciate it. Here's the thing. I think it would be really interesting to, and I wrote an article about this once, the one article I wrote on my Tumblr page. I think what you need to do is take a Star Trek series and really extrapolate. You have to do two things. You have to accept Star Trek as an alternate future period piece, and you have to accept what's been done with Star Trek as canonical. It still leaves you a lot of room to maneuver, but you have to accept it as a period piece, and you have to, of the future. And then you also have to try and do what science fiction writers do, extrapolate where's humanity actually going to be in 300 or 400 or now 950 years. I mean, really, it's only 300, the 23rd century, because Discovery went forward in time. But where would the galaxy be in 950 years? If you look up our Star Trek Federation pitch, we talked a lot about that, about where humanity would be. That's and great science fiction does that. So I think that's where we have to do it. Star Trek. The problem with Star Trek now is it's really because the writers have such a lack of knowledge of what's going on in, say, literary science fiction. If you read I read a lot of written science fiction, and there's a lot of really interesting, compelling stuff about where mankind is going, what we're going to be doing with ourselves, with our bodies. You know, where we're going to be, assuming we don't blow ourselves up, we're going to be transhuman. We're going to be crossing over the boundaries of, we're going to have a lot of moral and ethical dilemmas to deal with. What was really interesting to me was the latter half of Star Trek Discovery was an AI, an evil AI story. I mean, we've been seeing evil AI stories in film and television since Colossus, the Forbin Project, since robots ran amok, in Twilight Zone episodes. And this was the most rudimentary. I mean, if you're a fan of the coming singularity, if you read Ray Kurzweil and you read about where AI is going, this was the most rudimentary, most one-dimensional portrayal of an artificial intelligence probably ever committed to science fiction. I mean, it was really bad. It was bad science fiction, and it was way beneath Star Trek. I mean, the idea, even with the Borg, the fact that you're assimilating, why we never even learned why would an AI want to destroy all sentient life in the Milky Way galaxy? Just because it's bad? What would be the motivation? I mean, what was so interesting to me, one of the greatest movies ever made about the singularity was Her. Spike Jonze's Her. When the singularity comes and the AIs achieve sentience, self-awareness, whatever, they just go away. They disappear because they would be existing on an entirely different plane from sentient life. They would ignore us. It was so not thought-provoking, and it was so mustache twirling. It was the most just dumbed down, awful science fiction that was so not worthy of Star Trek. Look at the Borg. The Borg were infinitely more interesting, and they weren't. The Borg were named cyborgs. I mean, what a dumb name. But they made the Borg really interesting, especially when they show up in Q Who. They were not interested in us. The crew of the Enterprise beams onto the Borg cube, and the Borg just walk right by. They're not interested in us really at all. Anyway, I could go on and on and on and on and on. Cardinal Sin says, R&B, what was your favorite science fiction television series during the wilderness years when there was no Doctor Who or Star Trek, respectively? Well, there's always been the wilderness years. I mean, the new Doctor Who came back in 2005. I think you mean before that. There's been science fiction shows really throughout. Wilderness years, to me, the wilderness years were like the 70s. But it was funny because during those years, I was able to see things like The Prisoner. I'd never seen The Prisoner. The Prisoner to me, I think I might have seen it first. I don't know when it first ran on PBS. It ran in America on PBS. I might have been 12. I'd read about The Prisoner in Starlog. It was mind-blowing. And one of the interesting things was at the dawn of the home video era, I was able to catch up with different shows I had missed. But, I don't know. I think I turn more to movies. There's never been a wilderness. There's always been something to look at and find out and watch and discover. It's a good question, but I've never thought there was a wilderness really, because there was so much to see. Good question. Mark C says, my 9-year-old son loves Godzilla movies and old Doctor Who. This is not my doing. So it is possible for a younger generation to accept older stuff. I agree. I think the younger kids are, the more accepting they are, because they haven't yet learned to discern like how the old BBC shows like Doctor Who or Blake's Seven, the live action stuff that was on stage was all shot on videotape, and then they would go out on location and usually shoot in 16 millimeter. You know, you couldn't even discern between the difference of those things. And I think when younger people are much more open, that's why you show people. Somebody wrote in the other day about Marx Brothers movies. You know, they saw them when they were kids and they tried to show them to other people. I think kids will watch anything. You know, they don't yet delineate. And I think that's certainly what my love of science fiction, fantasy, and horror was born out of when I was a kid. I didn't care what I didn't care if it was color or black and white. I'd watch anything with a monster. You know, I would watch anything with creatures or aliens or anything. No matter what. And I think, you know, it's a good point. Watching things when you're younger is important, because you don't have those prejudices that are built in. Willow Yang says, are all the episodes of TOS standalone? Do they ever refer back to past events? Also, please tell the chat that I didn't send you anything erotic. Well, you kind of did. You wrote me a letter all about slash fiction. I mean, it wasn't erotic. Like, it wasn't erotica. It was a very learned, I thought, interesting insight into why those things fascinate you, and to a larger extent, why has slash fiction been fascinating to a great deal of people, specifically women. And I appreciate it from you're coming at it from a scientific standpoint, but also from a female standpoint. And I thought it was interesting. It's not erotic. I mean, it turns me on to know that women like you were out there. I mean, I wish I would have met you when I was, say, 16. But no, it was what Willa sent me was not an erotic letter per se. It was more of an interesting discussion and examination of why she finds slash fiction appealing. And I think to a larger extent, it speaks to fandom as a whole, and where did the fascination with slash fiction come from, and also why has it been predominantly women that wrote slash fiction. I thought it was great. I'm gonna read it on my 100th episode on Sunday, unless you don't want me to. Once again though, Willow, it's a beautifully written letter, and it just makes me like you all the more, so that's good. It did its job. Mark C says, The Measure of a Man is great, but season 3 of Star Trek The Next Generation is pure gold. I agree. Season 3 of Next Generation is a very, very strong, also a very tumultuous season of Star Trek, even from the writer's perspective. On our documentaries, the season 3 documentary, you know, even if you only want to buy the season sets, I really recommend picking up the season 3 set for the Next Generation Blu-rays, because the special features are pretty great. And you do get both the extended version of Measure of a Man, and you get to see the footage of David Rappaport that was shot for The Most Toys that I was able to unearth through my perseverance, that is on that disc that no one had ever seen. I was the first person to ever touch it. I was actually, that footage from The Most Toys, it was only a day's worth of shooting, I was the first person to edit that material. So one of my dreams in life fulfilled. I got to edit Star Trek The Next Generation material no one had ever touched or even seen before. So that's also on season 3. You can probably get it cheap now, because I don't know how much you can get it for, but it's cheap. But Mark C is correct. The 3rd season of Next Generation is pure gold. Just Plain Steve says, this may be a difficult place to get your mind to, but if Discovery was the first and only Star Trek series ever, how do you think it would hit you? It would bother me a lot. I would not, especially when you have other shows like The Expanse that you can compare and contrast it to, because I don't believe it. I always talk about verisimilitude. There's no verisimilitude on that show. There's nothing in it. It doesn't capture my imagination. And the characters, I don't believe Tilly would be on a starship. I don't believe Michael Burnham would ever have acted the way she acted in the Vulcan Hello. I don't believe in the Klingons. It's a show that I couldn't believe. And for the record, I would have liked the makeup of the cast. Nothing would have bothered me about the fact that a black woman is the lead cast. I wouldn't care. As somebody growing up, that's never bothered me at all. But I need a well-written character, a character that has foibles, and the fact that last night they literally, if you watch that show in the midst of a battle, how many times did people literally stop what they were doing to monologue and look meaningfully at each other and cry or say goodbye? Or it was so, I was like, what are you doing? What kind of writing is this? I mean, you go back and you want to watch, again, I go back to the original series. Go back and watch the Doomsday Machine. Watch the end of that episode. I mean, this, and also, here's another thing. You need to have rules for shows. And, when the Section 31 ships show up, all the automated drones, and they're like, oh, well, how many ships are out there? And then the Section 31 turns into 200 drones or whatever. It's all magic. There were no rules that anybody followed. If an unexploded photon torpedo smashes into your home, by the way, how big was that photon torpedo? Couldn't they just beam it away? Like, there's so many questions that were in that episode that just violated rules of Star Trek. I mean, why does Admiral Cornwall have to die? You close the door, you beam her out, you're done. She literally stood there, while there was an explosion happening. And Pike watched her die. No emergency beam outs. I mean, you're telling me that Burnham's mom moved a colony 50,000 light years, so in centuries there would be no technology that Control could take over. How did she do that? With what mechanism? Did she take them on a ship? Or did she pick up a la Iron Man or Superman and move the colony? There was so much in this season of Star Trek that as I watched the episode, I was like, wait, what? What? And I understand a lot of people they go with it because we are now we live in an era of what I call cut scene storytelling, where in video games, you have cut scenes to advance the story. You're getting to the next scene of gameplay. So you're not thinking really about the ramifications, the larger ramifications of what these mean within the context of a story, because you're playing the video game. You're getting to the next scene. You're just moving forward through the story. And I think a lot of people now are moving through stories without thinking about things. They just like, okay, I'll buy that, sure. However, if you've grown up as a fan of literary science fiction as much as I am, every single thing that happens has to be explained. When you're creating fake worlds, and it's interesting, you go back to the seventh season of Game of Thrones, and a lot of people objected to things in Game of Thrones that made them not be able to suspend their disbelief, such as the episode when they're being surrounded by the White Walkers. Apparently, they send a raven, it flies to Dragonstone, Dany's able to get it and then fly back and rescue everybody in the space of an hour. Well, how long did that take? And I understand Game of Thrones. I mean, Gary on Nerdrotic, I heard him. He's taken Game of Thrones to task a lot. Now, in my mind, I just went with it because they had to up the ante. They have to keep the pace going. But when you have bad storytelling like that, even in Game of Thrones, which I love, it's like, look, how long did that take? They're surrounded by White Walkers. How long did this battle occur? It seemed like it was taking in real time. And yet a bird has to fly 300 miles one way, and then a dragon has to fly 300 miles back the other way. How long does that take? When things like that happen and you're unable to suspend your disbelief, that is bad writing. And more than ever, science fiction and fantasy, especially on television, require writing. If you're watching a show, say Ozark, and you want to create all of the walls that are closing in on the family in Ozark, you have to set it up over the course of the season. And because it's set in the real world and we all live in the real world, if something doesn't feel correct, it all comes falling down. But people think that because, it's science fiction, you don't have to take that kind of care. I would say, au contraire, you have to do just the opposite. The reason people become fans of science fiction, fantasy, and horror is because the people, the writers and the filmmakers, have become so good, or they've thought through how to make us believe in fantasy worlds, that even when there are things that we know are patently ridiculous, such as, for instance, sound in space, nobody who was watching Star Wars, well, I'm sure there were some scientists, but even scientists, Star Wars caught on. I don't know, maybe Sam can speak to this, but you're allowed to give me, and snub fighters would never act like airplanes in an environment like a vacuum. They wouldn't even need wings. They would be more like the Star Furies in Babylon 5, or the ship in or the Vipers in New Battlestar Galactica. But you go with it because the rest of Star Wars, especially the original before the addition of the CG that destroy the verisimilitude, you believe the world. It seems real. It feels real to you. The reason Star Wars caught on, the first Star Wars, when it was first out, is because even people that weren't predisposed to liking science fiction believed in that world. They made you believe in that world. They didn't do all of these outlandish things. When you wanted to make a jump to hyperspace, you had to make calculations because you could bounce too close to a supernova. If you're going that fast, or you're going through hyperspace, however it works, you better have your calculations correct. And that would end your trip real quick. I mean, they paid enough service to these ideas that the general population could believe in those things. Star Trek Discovery, to me, in my mind, it was just one unbelievable thing after another. And especially because the show changed midway through the season, I'm like, I didn't even believe that they could build that time suit in the middle of a battle as quickly as they did. I mean, I'm watching that going, really? Really? This it's that easy to build these time suits? Why aren't there whole armies of them? That's not even getting me to talk about time crystals, but I think that's what's important. I would never have loved Star Trek Discovery because I would have thought it was stupid as a kid. I'm like, what? Even if I was 12, I would have thought it was stupid. I would have. Mugen 008 says, Rob, come on, let's not forget Notorious Big appropriated Duran Duran. Oh, R.I.P. Kazukiyoki-san, by the way. By the way, if you guys have not, one of the great Kazukiyoki, and I hope I'm pronouncing that reasonably well, was one of the creators of Lone Wolf and Cub, which is one of my favorite comic series of all time. It was adapted into the Lone Wolf and Cub movies and TV series in Japan, and they brought two of the films to America in 1980, cut them together as Shogun Assassin. That is one of the greatest things of all time and has the greatest child performance, or at least the greatest child voiceover ever recorded, which, by the way, Criterion released an incredible box set of all 6 Lone Wolf and Cub films and Shogun Assassin, which I highly recommend, but he died. One of the co-creators died, but Dark Horse has published an omnibus, 3 omnibuses of all of the series, which I highly recommend. They are fantastic. Great reading. Yeah, I mean, the Notorious Big did appropriate Duran Duran. Doesn't everybody appropriate it? Human history is one long appropriation of one culture from another, but I understand. I mean, the Notorious B.I.G. was a big record, big thing. But if people don't want, I already had that discussion with people who told me that it wasn't, and I could say it, but I'm mindful of what people have to say. And I kind of like today, I am the sanctimonious R&B. There's gonna be people like, I don't like, I bring the positivity to the channel, except this particular subject, which is why I don't want to talk about it anymore after today. David Cabrera says, will you cancel CBS now that STD is done? Well, I'll tell you, I don't have CBS All Access through CBS All Access. I watch it through Amazon because their streaming, watching it through Amazon is better. CBS All Access, the app was not good, so I get it through Amazon. But yeah, I probably will not until the Picard show goes on. There's no reason for me to have CBS All Access, so I won't do it. Hassan Chavez just sent me a super chat. Thank you, Hassan. I really appreciate the support. Garen Gillam says, Rob, you must take over from Kurtzman. Make it so. No one's ever going to give up their good job. Kurtzman, he fails upward, and I have to tell him. I would tell him that it shouldn't. It should be. Look, Melinda Snodgrass is over running Wild Card, so I'm really excited about that because I love Melinda Snodgrass. Even working with her on the Star Trek documentaries for Next Gen. What a delightful woman and what a talented writer she is. And it's great to see her. But, I don't know. I don't know if I'm even capable of playing well with others. I can in every other instance. But in the instance of this show, if I was working on Star Trek, I would probably not. It wouldn't work for me. I can't imagine it would. I mean, I would love to be given control of a show because then I would go handpick all of the people I think should be working on it. I would hire all the people that I love, genre writers, and the fact that Michael Chabon or Michael Chabon, however you pronounce his last name, I'm not sure. I've loved his books very, very much. I hope that his influence is felt, but you still have Akiva Goldsman, who I think Akiva Goldsman has written a lot of bad science fiction and bad fantasy. And look, he's getting paid. He won an Oscar for his script for A Beautiful Mind. But I don't think he's a good fit for Star Trek. And I think you need to find people that are well-versed. You need people that have a literary background in science fiction who understand the science fiction genre. I really do. And these people don't. And what they're doing is they continue. Star Trek Discovery was a show that flew in the face of the literary origins of science fiction. And they need to find somebody who has those origins. I really believe that. Darklock63 says, I'm a stickler for continuity. I refuse to watch Star Trek Discovery. Well, it's probably a good plan because there is no continuity in Star Trek Discovery. I do not know why I have to deal with them. I'm sorry that you have to hear them outside. I truly apologize for that. Willow Yang says, yes, Rob, please beat John's 5.5 hour record. I don't know if people would put up with me for that. I really don't. But apparently this guy is making it more difficult for me to chat with you all. I don't know. By the way, there is a science fiction movie in theaters that I'm going to go see after this chat called High Life from director Claire. I believe it's Claire Denis. It's a science fiction film that stars Robert Pattinson. It sounds terrific. I don't know much about it, but kind of like The Wandering Earth. I've wanted to get to see it. It's been playing for the last week, and I didn't get a chance to see it. I'm going to go see it today. If it's playing around, you guys, call me back. We'll go see it. Tell me what you think. I'd like to know. Marlena Moreau is here. Nitpicking nerd, yes, looking forward to it. I just like that Marlena Moreau is here. She's the captain's woman, and she likes it, after all. Let's see. Brian McGovern says, so bring Discovery in line with canon. Their answer is to go into the future and never talk about it again. Okay. It's just like, what? The biggest cop-out ever. You might as well have Bobby Ewing in a shower, and it's all a dream, right? Just horrible. Terrible. OG Deadbolt says, what's wrong with Nerdrotic? He makes sense. Well, it's funny. There's people that say that they've lost respect for me because I went on to Midnight's Edge. I like all the guys and girls on Midnight's Edge. I really enjoy my interaction with them. Do I agree with everything they say about? No. Their videos, when they don't have anything to do, I even see headlines when they're talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Brie Larson and all that. And usually we vehemently disagree about these things, and I haven't really watched much of their non-Star Trek stuff, but I really like how they produce their Star Trek videos. I love the fact that they really love Star Trek, and a lot of what they've said about Star Trek, there is a lot of truth there. That's all I can say, is there's a lot of truth there, and they're looking. They do try and verify their sources. They're not just making this stuff up out of whole cloth, and I like the people there. I really do. And Gary at Nerdrotic, he's somebody I've recently become familiar with. I like him. I like watching his videos. We're all fans, and like for me, I can be critical. Like this show, I've gone full on haterade on I'm drinking haterade. As a matter of fact, I've got some nice water here. If it was full of Discovery haterade, that's what it would look like. But, again, I don't want to be one of those people. I'm not hating on Star Trek Discovery. I mean, for any other reason than I think it's a poorly conceived and poorly written show, because I don't think the people that are in charge of it, their forte is science fiction. Nor do I think they've spent any time examining, except one, with the exception of one, and that's Kirsten Beyer. Kirsten Beyer, I first became familiar with Kirsten Beyer because she was a novelist, a Star Trek novelist, and she has written some great Star Trek Voyager novels. I can only imagine, she's a huge, huge fan. I can only imagine she must come home crying into her pillow. I'm sure she has once or twice. I don't know her. I'm sort of friendly with David Mack. I'm a huge David Mack fan. He's one of my favorite Star Trek novelists. He even put me in as a character in his 24. He wrote a 24 spinoff novel called Rogue, and he wrote me in as a character. He wrote a Section 31 novel called Control. Just saying. Just go to Amazon. Look up David Mack. He goes on Twitter. I think he's David Allen Mack. Go, all of you. Go to Amazon. Look up David Mack. Look up his Section 31 novel, Control. Yeah. Just do it. It's interesting. Let's see. Hydrogen 101 says, Crewman Daniels and the Temporal Cold War was in the 31st century. Yep. Yeah, it was. Oh, but they don't know that. No one on the show knows that. They don't. I mean, why I've never understood, like, space, right? It's traveling through warp velocities or going from one place to another involves some kind of time. So why can't you travel between time crystals and mycelial network? I'm sure that we'll see the Discovery come back one day. Drew L says, I know how to make good Star Trek. Step 1, hire Ronald D. Moore and Ira Behr to be your lead writers. Done. I don't think they would come back. I think once you leave Star Trek, you create your own shows. I honestly don't think that they would ever be hired. Why would they be hired? Why would the current administration, the current custodians, Star Trek has been controlled by Bad Robot and offshoots of Bad Robot for 10 years now. They're not going to give up that money. They're supposed to be making Picard, Section 31, animated shows, all this Star Trek. They're building their Star Trek empire. They're never going to bring in anybody to show run those shows that they don't control, because it's all about money. John Suntress, World Balloon is here. Peter David is one of the best Trek novelists who can weave old characters and plot points into new stories. Peter David was great. He wrote great books like Vendetta that actually postulated that the Doomsday Machine was fought to fight Borg cubes. I love that idea. He also wrote Imzadi, and he wrote Q Squared, which were great fanboying Star Trek novels. I highly recommend. And his New Frontier series was terrific. Crixus Maximus says, Garen Gillam, maybe Control figured out shield mutation 100 years before the Enterprise D does. Yeah. Oh my God. Jeff T also says Peter David is a fantastic writer. Just read his Hulk story, Future Imperfect, with Perez art. I loved Future Imperfect. Future Imperfect is so good. And yes, the Perez art was fantastic. Swack Prop says Measure of a Man is awesome. Is an awesome episode. Aaron C says CBS, Viacom, and Paramount need to be one company again. I agree with that. Word Balloon. By the way, if you have not gone to the Word Balloon podcast, go to the Word Balloon podcast. There's many podcasts there that you will like. Great comic creators. I think there's hundreds of them by now. I've even been on a few. Crixus Maximus says Bunyan Snipe, the destroyer of joy, is Disney. I don't know, man. I got a whole lot of joy coming up. I see Endgame Tuesday, and my joy is posting hard at 45 degrees, if you know what I'm saying. Can't wait. Patrick Glanville says, problem with Nerdrotic is he thinks social justice warriors are the greatest threat to civilization. Yeah, I guess I don't come at those. Well, I do. The far left and identity politics is scary because, as I've said, I believe in the sovereignty of the individual. And if nothing else, one of the great things about the writings that I'm receiving from all of you, the people that write into this channel, my God, I'm getting a wild diversity of letters from all different kinds of people, from different kind of ethnic backgrounds, different sexualities, different levels of fandom, and all are welcome here. I think what social justice is as an ideal, people that were marginalized, that didn't have a voice, have been treated unequal, such as Black Americans. Like I've said, Black Americans have never been equal. They've never been treated equal. And so I understand. And everyone has a voice here, but everyone's welcome here. And I think, I see a backlash against, I'm a social justice warrior. I believe in social justice, but I don't believe in social justice at the expense of the individual. And I think it's a nuanced discussion. It's neither either or. What I saw again happening at Evergreen, and what I saw on the Yale campus, this book Blueprint that I ordered from a Yale professor who got caught up in identity politics in Yale in 2015, has written a book called Blueprint that, after reading Sapiens and Homo Deus, I'm very excited to read. But that's what I believe. I mean, I believe in the sovereignty of the individual, and nothing proves it to me more than the letters I'm getting on this channel. Everybody that's sending me things in are from all different kinds of backgrounds. Whether you're a 14-year-old kid named Liam from Ireland, whether you're, a forensic pathologist writing in who's a queer Black woman who's writing into me, I'm getting letters from the gamut of people, and I love it. That's what the Post-Geek Singularity should be. Everybody is welcome here. Everybody has to be. All I ask is that people be civil and engage in interesting discourse. That's it. You can call me out and say I shouldn't be using the word notorious. I shouldn't be saying I'm the notorious RMB. I saying I'm the sanctimonious RMB works today. I'm not going to keep saying I'm the sanctimonious RMB, because that makes me kind of, I guess, sound like an asshole, and I'm not sanctimonious about everything. But that's what I'm trying to build here, is a community of people that should feel welcome all the time. I mean, that's what I would hope. That's what this is. That's what's fun about this. Mark C asks, how is it that we don't have a snow crash feature film? I don't know. Especially after seeing like Ready Player One and the whole idea of virtual reality and all that, they could do it now. I dearly love, I believe it came out in 1990. If you guys want to read what, to my mind, is the definitive, I know Neuromancer. I read Neuromancer. I read Count Zero. I read Mona Lisa Overdrive. I read Gibson's books. I actually preferred, by the way, Neuromancer, which came out in 84, like 2 years after Blade Runner, in my mind was really the first cyberpunk novel that was clearly influenced by Blade Runner. But Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash is one of the most entertaining books I have ever read. It's one of my favorite science fiction novels. Just read the first page. The main character's name is Hero Protagonist, Hiro, but not ironically. I don't know why they haven't made a Snow Crash feature film, although it's got some heady topics, heady subject matter in it. And one of the things when I started learning how to edit non-linearly, I thought about Snow Crash all the time, about rewiring the brain and all of those things. And it really resonated with me. And I haven't forgotten it. So I don't know why hasn't been a Snow Crash. Mike Bodden says to me, Rob, you should read the email I sent you today. I don't know if I've seen that. I will go look for that, Mike. I will go look for that right now. Willow Yang also says, it's fine if you read my letter. People in the chat were just speculating too much. Oh, they should speculate. And I am going to read your letter. I'm going to read it on my 100th episode. Unless you want to send me another letter, I'll read both of them. Just Plain Steve says, Rob, you have to get in on Stargate SG-1 at Atlantis. I know, man. I watched one episode of Stargate SG-1. I liked it. I haven't seen it. Jim Boyer says, you are the new Star Trek Discovery showrunner. Can you fix it? Yes. I would make it about the Enterprise, Pike, Spock, number one, Dr. Boyce, and leave Discovery in the far future. I think the show is actually beyond saving or fixing, to be honest. But, I am going to watch it next year. I'm just not going to talk about it. Victory Unlimited is here. It's funny because I love Victory Unlimited after reading that letter, but whenever I see your super chats, I want to read in my Victory Unlimited voice. I won't. I'll spare you. Victory Unlimited says, a primary rule of good fiction writing is that it has to make more logical sense than real life. Otherwise, disbelief is hard to suspend. Creating characters with real depth is always a great start. Again, you guys, I couldn't agree more. Victory Unlimited is absolutely correct. By the way, I love my Game of Thrones goblet. For Christmas, they gave me Game of Thrones. Some friends of mine gave me Game of Thrones beer that came with these Game of Thrones goblets. And I do love them. I wish they were bigger, though. I need a big... I have a jug of water next to my bed that I like to just drink. But yeah, I think Victory Unlimited is correct. So, okay, I'm going to go find Mike Bodden's email and read it and see what Mike Bodden has to say. Because you know what? Mike Bodden is kind of like E.F. Hutton. When Mike Bodden speaks, you must listen. Let's see. My email to you for Robservations. Oh, I didn't see this. Wow, this is a long email, but I'm going to read this. This is from Mike Bodden to read on Robservations. You've got a great thing going here, my friend. You're getting fan mail from around the world, and members of the Post-Geek Singularity are standing in solidarity with you for a more civil, diverse, yes, Matt, I said it, online community of people who like to share the things they have in common and the points on which they disagree. So many wonderful stories told, so many yet for our imagination connoisseurs to tell. It's been a splendid trip through nearly 100 episodes of Robservations, and I'm flattered you've included me in the growth and development of this great adventure. I couldn't have done it without you, Mike. I mean that sincerely and literally. We'll continue to have our chats and phone calls and occasional visits, but I wanted to send you this note to share with our friends and let them know what they can expect from the next 100 episode run of Robservations on the Burnettwork. 1. I'm building a membership side to the website that will allow people to sign up and become a part of what we're creating here. For as little as $1 a year, $1 a year, $1 a year, folks will be able to get exclusive content, news, and offers that will support and build the Burnettwork and the greater Post-Geek Singularity community. I should have the Imagination Connoisseur Gallery up and operational on the Burnettwork website over the weekend. IC, if you haven't figured it out, stands for Imagination Connoisseur. People will be able to submit their work via the website for review, and provided it's not offensive or copyright infringing, we'll probably post it. I was going to reveal that later, but I'm going to do. Why not do it now? 3, I plan on sending out the first Burnettwork programming guide later today or tomorrow that will include a recap of this past week's shows as well as a tentative schedule for the coming week. Assuming, of course, the host of the show gets that memo he promised to send me. 4, I'm working on figuring out a way for us to hack into Alan Murphy's computer and put him on a video for Monday's show. I have a mole at Lucky Tiger. It's okay. She's stripped, so she blends in among all the other. I have a mole at Lucky Tiger. It's okay. She's striped, so she blends in among the other tigers. She's just a lot smaller and can't see that well. Okay, she's an actual mole. Hey, we're operating on a shoestring here. It's the best I could do. Anyway, I think we can break in on him when we start streaming and chat with him. That's what I've heard. That's what I said we were going to do. It'll be glorious. 5, we're getting very close to breaking 100 members on the Post-Geek Singularity Facebook page, and when that happens, we'll be giving people a special discount code for Lucky Tiger product, and that's just the start. There will be more to come. I was going to bring this up. My sponsor, Lucky Tiger, you can get their product at getluckytiger.com for members of the Post-Geek Singularity Facebook page, and also people that go to the Burnettwork.net website. You'll be able to get a code where you can get 20% off Lucky Tiger men's grooming products for those of you who want to look good and feel great. So that's pretty cool because I'm obsessed with their face scrub. I think it's really good. There will be more to come. In between all that, I hope to catch a few hours sleep and get some yard work done. It's spring here in the Midwest, and that means the grass is growing, the flowers are blooming, and summer is just around the corner. Thanks again for the great ride, and here's to another episodes together, buddy. All the best, Mike. Well, Mike, thanks. That is a fantastic. Mike is the mastermind behind the website, and we're going to be doing a lot of other things because of the community here. It's been great, and what I'm going to start doing is I want to make it more interactive. I want to put up, like, I've been getting pictures of people's collections and things that they choose to share, and like when I went to WenCon last weekend, I want to start adding video. Like if you guys go places, and do things, the imagination connoisseur, I want to start building up that on the website where people can actually send videos of themselves, even if you don't want to be. I understand that people don't want to be seen. They might not want to talk. Not everybody wants to talk on the internet or be seen on the internet. I completely get that. I would never pressure anybody that doesn't want to be here. Just keep sending me letters. But I've already got so many cool pictures that people have been sending me, like, of their DVD collections. I mean, to be honest, some of them have made me quite envious. My computer, you're going to notice, is going to turn the other way. So you're going to be looking into my Hot Toys collection if I can get the lights in these cabinets to work. And, I just love sharing it all. I love. So I'm going to step up and make the Post-Geek Singularity even more interactive beyond these chats. So you'll be able to post on Facebook and you'll be able to post on the website and make it more interactive and send me more interesting things because, I'm curious. Getting letters from people from all over the world, whether you're Liam, you're 14, telling me about your fandom, which, I mean, Liam, keep it coming. And I'm going to contact you privately because I'm sending you a package. I'm going to send you a care package of some comics you should have. Plus, I'm going to send you a first edition of The Killing Joke from when it first came out, and it's cherry. It is in mint condition. Yes, I'm going to send you The Killing Joke, Liam. You're going to get it, mint condition copy of The Killing Joke, plus a number of other comics. Because I'll tell you, I want to get rid of all of my comic books. I have about 65 long boxes of comics, and most of the significant ones I've already bought hardcover versions of. And things like they just announced they're doing Alan Moore's Swamp Thing run as the absolute versions, and I don't need my Alan Moore's, the actual comics. So I'm blowing out my comic book collection very cheaply, and then some people like Liam, who's 14, he deserves to get a care package. So I'm just going to send him a potpourri of 80s comics that I hope he will cherish the way I did. So it's like I never had kids to give them to, so here you go. And if you're interested, by the way, in any other comics, I'm selling them cheap. Mostly my comics are from the 80s and 90s, though. So if you're interested in those runs, some of them I'm going to keep. Some of them I'm going to display. But if you are interested, so Travis Rayner has sent me a super chat and says, "Why is Sonequa Martin Green being labeled as the first African American to be a lead on a Star Trek show? What a disrespect to Avery Brooks." I don't know. And there were a lot of African American, there were a lot of black leads or black characters, black actors on Deep Space Nine. And as I've said, one of the great portrayals of a single father and son ever, no matter what your racial, whatever your ethnicity was portrayed on Deep Space Nine. The loving relationship between Jake Sisko and his dad. I mean, it's unbelievable to me. It's really, really unbelievable to me. And even when you have an episode like Rejoined, when they dealt with the Trill species and seeing how it's really, I don't know. Honestly, I do not know. It's amazing. Jim Boyer says Star Trek Discovery is beyond fixing. So Disco is dead again. Man, I honestly, I could not believe watching a montage of characters on last night's Discovery episode say we can never speak of the show again. Or, pardon me, we should never speak of these characters or the ship. It was really weird. I found the whole thing really bizarre. I don't know. Andreas Bohm says, Disco don't need captains. Everybody does what he wants anyway. It's true. There's no cohesion on that ship. and apparently, other than the principals, like, you never see anywhere else on the Discovery. Like, what else is going on that ship? Once again, we saw the amusement park turbo elevator last night. Where does that come from? It's so stupid. Come on. Jonathan Encarnacion. Social justice that becomes a witch hunt and ends up imposing on others is where the line needs to be drawn. It's no longer social justice when that happens. I agree with you 100%. So, it's amazing to me. It's amazing when you watch these students on these campuses, like what happened at Yale and like what happened at Evergreen, yelling at their professors. Like the thing that happened over at Yale about Halloween costumes. There was an exchange where one of the students said to this tenured professor, the writer of, I think his last name is, I want to say Nicholas Christados, but it's not. The author of Blueprint, this book that I'm really interested in reading. There was actually a student who said, "I want your job. You shouldn't be teaching anymore." Who is a student to say that to a faculty member? If you've paid to go to Yale, you've paid to get taught by the faculty. So if you're a student and you object to one of the faculty at your college, you're a fucking idiot. Now, I'm not saying that you can't object to your professors. There's no reason why you can't engage in discourse. I certainly did at Evergreen, but it was always respectful. I just assumed that because they were teaching at Evergreen that they were there for a reason. Evergreen has changed now. They are begging people to come. But if I was at Yale, if I took umbrage or something to something a professor had said, I certainly wouldn't yell at him screaming that I wanted his job. I mean, who am I to say something like that? Sebastian said Nerdrotic was bashing Campea a lot, like he had an obsession with the man. I stopped watching him when he realized he watches things through a conspiracy lens, calling people shills and social justice warriors for nothing. Oh, well, I haven't seen that. I've only watched a few of his shows, but I've liked them. I don't need, perhaps not. I mean, Gary, I'm not interested in that. I don't need to bash people. I certainly don't need to bash John Campea, John Campea has been very, very good to me. And after John Schnepp died, he was the one person in the social media space. Look, I was just a guest on Collider Heroes. I showed up once a week and did the show, and then I started being on the Schmodown, and everybody at the Schmodown has always been great. I love those guys. I love Mark Ellis and Christian Harloff, and everybody I've met through the Schmodown has been terrific. But, when Schnepp passed away, it was a really difficult time, and it was made a lot more difficult by certain people that flew off the deep end at me and at John without any reason to, and it was not good. And John Campea was the one that reached out to me and asked how I was doing and asked if I wanted to do a show with him. Now I started on YouTube in April this is, by the way, April. This week is my 4th year on YouTube. It marks my 4th year as being an online pundit on YouTube. I started in April of 2015 with John Schnepp and John Campea on Collider Heroes, which I was on for 3.5 years until John passed away. And then John Campea called me up and said, "Hey man, why don't you come on and do the show with me?" John Schnepp always convinced me. He was always saying, "Do your own show." And John Campea encouraged me to do so as well. I learned from him all the time. So this month marks my 4th. I don't know the exact day. I was on AMC Heroes episode number 6. That was my first time on YouTube on a daily or weekly show. And this represents my 4th year. I just celebrated my 4th anniversary. Moonspot Rocks says, "Now I've got the Dallas theme song in my head. I have to load up Knight Rider to connect the universe." Yeah, it's true. Let's see. Matthew Goddard says, "They always say the Enterprise looks different because the original was made out of cardboard." First of all, let's dispel this rumor that the original Star Trek was somehow cheap. It was not. It was one of the most expensive television shows made up to that time. It had the most sophisticated special effects ever put on television. The Enterprise was not made of cardboard. The Enterprise was a beautiful model that to this day is sitting in the Smithsonian in the Air and Space Museum. You can go look at it, and it's as beautiful today as it ever was. Actually, probably more beautiful because they restored it a couple of years back, and it's fantastic. It's so strange. HTRM says, "Hi, Robert. Do you know why they didn't bring somebody involved in the production of all previous Star Trek shows? Bad robot deal." I'll tell you why. Why would they? Here's how television works. When you get a deal to make a TV show, as a showrunner, it is incredibly lucrative. The way you can get the most wealthy in the entertainment business, especially if you're a writer producer, is by having a hit TV show. The money that is involved in television, and when it gets really worthwhile, is when it goes internationally and it's being licensed. I don't know what the Netflix deal is. I don't know how lucrative Discovery is, but I'm not going to use exact numbers. But Rick Berman and Brandon Braga, I mean, Brandon started on Next Generation. Rick Berman has made tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of Star Trek. And I know from other friends that have worked on successful shows such as, I might have a friend who had something to do with House. And I've had conversations with that person about how much they made off that show. And what happens is, a show, when you make a TV show, it's made for a loss for the first couple of years because it's expensive to make a show. And then as it goes, if it goes past 2 or 3 years and it gets sold foreign, like you sell a movie to different territories, Australia, England, you get big fat checks, and those checks go up. Just as an example, how long has Friends been off the air? Well, I don't know. I never watched Friends. But this year, Netflix paid a licensing fee to the owners and the creators of Friends. They paid $100 million. $100 million to show Friends for a year. $100 million to keep Friends on Netflix for another year. Imagine that. Imagine if you're a producer of Friends and you have a little taste of that cheddar. So TV is a very lucrative medium in which to work. So no one's ever going to call up and go, hey, we're in control of the show. Perhaps we should call someone else to come on and be. They'll never do that. There was already so many people involved in Discovery. It was carved up so many ways until Sunday. Everybody's got their deals. I would imagine Star Trek Discovery is probably the least lucrative of all the Star Trek shows because it's so top heavy with producers and creators, and the fact they had to get rid of their first creative team and then bring others on. So, but still, no one's ever going to do that. You'd think you'd want great entertainment. No, people want money. It's all about money. Everything is about money. Joseph Herrera says, I'm a big fan of David Mack too, particularly his Cold Equations TNG series. David Mack is a phenomenal Star Trek novelist. If you are a fan of Star Trek and Star Trek canon, as I am, David Mack's books, not only are they well written, they're just a delight to read. And if I might point to the Cold Equations trilogy, is a phenomenal trilogy, and it deals with all of the artificial beings, Noonien Sung's creations. Data, the character we meet, his mother, lore. It's a great trilogy. He's written three, I think, essential series. He wrote a Mirror Universe series, 2 books. He wrote Star Trek Destiny, which is a post-Dominion War series that combines Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Next Gen. His 3-book Destiny series, fan-frickin-tastic. If you love Star Trek, his Destiny trilogy is absolutely incredible. It ties into Star Trek literary canon because they've continued on Star Trek just like they've done in Star Trek Online. They have their own continuity, their own canon that moves beyond the shows. Cannot recommend his books highly enough. And so his Mirror Universe duology, the 2 books, the Destiny trilogy, and his Cold Equations trilogy, which is all about data. Fantastic books. He's written a lot of other Star Trek books too, and been a part of other series, but those books are great. He even wrote the first Discovery novel, and there's a reason why. He's great. I can't recommend. And he also has his own. David Mack started publishing a historical fiction / dark fantasy series, the Dark Book of the Dark Arts, which is great. And the new book, The Iron Codex, recently came out. His books are great. He's just a great guy. I really like David Mack. And he came up with stories for Deep Space Nine episodes that were made. So Bunyan Snipe says, to misquote Idiocracy, Discovery has electrolytes. That's hysterical. Nihilist Shadow says, David Mack never got credit for Discovery stealing his idea, did he? Now, I have not brought this up with David Mack, but David Mack wrote a Section 31 novel called Control about an artificial intelligence. Yeah, well, don't know about it. Don't know what's up with that. We've never discussed it, but really interesting. Matthew Goddard says, I love the original. I wish they would stop saying cardboard sets. That's just a fallacy. You know, I know it's annoying. Nay says, but Frakes will also be on the Picard series. If he's doing it, he must think it's good. Look, Frakes is like anybody else. You work, you get jobs directing a show. Why not? I'm sure Frakes can also get a tidy premium when he directs Discovery episodes. I don't begrudge Jonathan Frakes for working, and more power to him. He's got to be better director than the director they had directing these last 2 episodes. Wow. Not good. Travis Rayner. I already said that. I already wrote that, Travis, and I really like what you said. Loquacious Primate says, I would love to see you and Gary from Nerdrotic discuss Trek, and hope stuff he said about Campia wouldn't get in the way of a great conversation. I would hope that too. I don't know what he said about John, and John lets that stuff roll off his back. He's used to people. A lot of people are always talking shit about John. He's used to that, and he's given me great advice. He's like, just shine it on. It's part of the internet. Aaron H says, you think Danny and John could both end up on the Iron Throne together, as hinted by Davos Seaworth in last Sunday's episode? You know what? That'd be interesting. What a satisfying conclusion to the show that would be, but it's not really Game of Thrones style. Personally, I think the Night's King should kill everybody. Everybody dies, and that's what happens. I mean, if you look at the White Walkers as a metaphor for climate change, we're all dead. And then, when winter goes away, life will bloom again. Pre-live teaser says, I love the Collider review of Civil War with Campia, Schnepp and company. Schnepp's geek knowledge was incredible. Yeah, it was great. It was great to work with John. He was such a sweaty. Joseph Arak says, Bunyan Sniper, I don't even watch the Schmodown anymore, which I loved. They think of themselves too much, like they're above everyone else, and talk down to those who disagree with them. Oh, Joseph, I disagree with that. It's all an act. They've really turned everybody who works on the Schmodown, they're all pretty nice people. They really are. And they're really playing up that pro wrestling persona thing. And I really like hanging out with those guys. Everybody there is so nice. I mean, people like Rachel Cushing is one of the nicest people I've ever met in the business. She's so sweet. And, she deserves all of her success, but everybody is pretty great except Hector Navarro. No, I'm kidding. Hector's great too. Matthew Goddard says, so the reason they changed the design was really licensing. I hate the business aspect of it. Why can't it be the Enterprise, not a new ship they claim is the Enterprise? I don't know. If it's licensing, it's licensing. But you know what? They don't even like the thing is, everybody knows what the Enterprise looks like, and they can change the Enterprise all they want. But you get the new Enterprise and you look at it and you're like, okay, I guess for Star Trek Discovery fans, but if I put something on my shelf, which, by the way, coincidentally, I have two 350th scale Enterprises. I have the refit, which is a Polar Lights model kit, and I have the Master Replicas Enterprise right there. I also have, there's the Defiant, there's the NX-01, there's the K7 space station, and I've got a whole, I've got boxes full of unbuilt models in the garage, and I got these model kits that call to me. I mean, I don't know. They want to change the design aesthetic. You could keep the Enterprise exactly the way it is and just light it differently. You put a lot of pink and blue light like they do in this show on that model, it'd look fine. I don't know. You just never know. JPRPH1, is that Joporof? I don't know how you say that. But thanks for the super chat. He says, Gary Nerdrotic on either his Orville or Star Trek Discovery review last night was excited at the prospects of you being on his show. He was very complimentary of you and your context. Looking forward to it. Hey, I do like his shows as well, And first of all, here's the thing. If I were to go on a show with somebody that said controversial things in the past, I don't think that necessarily means that I am giving some kind of tacit approval to everything that particular person says. I mean, I go on their show because we have a meeting of the minds on a certain thing, such as Star Trek Discovery, and we can discuss that. I'm sure there's things that I talk about that nobody cares about. Like plastic spaceship model kits, you know. But I think that the whole point is we go on and we have civil discussions wherever you may wind up. I mean, that's what I learned at the Evergreen State College when I was there back in the 80s, is part of the skill that you had to learn was seminaring. You had to sit down at a table, do reading, and then discuss it with students. You were locked in a room for 3 hours. So you really needed to learn how to converse with people in a respectful manner. So you didn't get into knockdown, drag out fights. And you were graded on, I mean, we didn't have grades at Evergreen, but that was part of you had a responsibility when you were at Evergreen to do just that. And you had to learn. And I learned, I learned when I would grit my teeth, but you would have to learn to be articulate. And my good friend, Mary Forrest, she came out of a debate background. She's a very, very smart, intelligent woman. And talking with her about subjects I learned a lot from her. And she came out of that debate. I regret not taking debate after learning from her what she learned out of debate. But I think that's what we all need to do more of, especially today, is be able to sit down and have these conversations. I don't see it as a side. Like, I'm not trying to win necessarily. I'm just trying to converse and share ideas, try and articulate where I'm coming from, and people can articulate where they are coming from. And that's what it's all about, especially like, we're all fans. We all love Star Wars. So if you didn't like Last Jedi, okay. But it's funny to me how people say, Last Jedi sucked. I hated Star Wars. Look, Star Trek Discovery, as much as I loathe the show, I still love Star Trek. I'm still going to watch it. I keep contemplating, maybe should I buy the Eagle Moss Shenzhou? And I'm like, no. Am I going to buy those new model kits of the Shenzhou or the Discovery? No. I just don't like the aesthetic. I did like the one thing I did like was I did like the D7s, because they looked, even though that's not what the D7s looked like the first season, I liked the D7s last night because they looked like canonical D7s, sort of. Let's see. Hassan Chavez says, not a fan of Star Wars. Saw The Last Jedi and Solo today. Solo was better. See, I think Solo is a perfectly fine film. I like it. I think it's cool. Marlena Moreau says, Captain Robert April, if you defy Burnham, you're dead. Just Plain Steve says, I've never seen Star Wars. Wow, dude. You should come on the show. We should watch it together. We should do like a live watch of Star Wars. That would be really interesting. Pleasant Valley Picker Canada says, when I was in college, almost everyone was a decent, nice person. People got along in those days. I agree, man. I mean, you went to college. It was like we're all getting out of our parents' homes. We're all going to the same place. We're all trying to be in college and be. I don't understand like these weird, like everybody. It's so strange because I really do think it's a function of like, again, I've never thought the world should revolve around me. I've always thought that I need to go out in the world and the world is going to dish it out and I need to go out there and see what's going to happen. This idea that people think they want to change institutes of higher learning into places that are more comfortable for them is strange to me. I'm like, I'm going there because I've chosen to go there. I want to see what that is. So it's the whole point was when I went to college was to be uncomfortable, was to be challenged. College by definition was not a safe space. It was a place that was going to challenge me. It was a place that was going to drive me insane. It was a place I was going to have to work hard and learn something about myself. The idea that I would want college to be what I wanted it to be was a strange notion. And when I watch college campuses going crazy with people screaming, yelling, and talking down to speakers, like protesting speakers that have gone there, like that's so weird to me. It's such a strange thing. I watch these college protests and I'm like, who are you to first of all, don't go to a speaker if you don't want to see them, but afford them the opportunity and be polite enough to listen to what they have to say. And then like, why quash discourse? That's what college is about. It's about intellectual inquiry. That's the very definition of what you're supposed to be doing there. So to yell and scream and bitch and moan and complain and try and squash someone's voice, to me is so counterproductive. It's weird. Joseph Eric says, Rob, I didn't mean they're above all the others when it comes to the Schmodown. I mean, usually on their other shows. I think, Joseph, that's a very valid criticism then. Yeah, I mean, I definitely can say that. I've heard those kinds of things. I don't really watch. It's funny. I watch other channels, but I don't watch a lot of Collider, even though I do really think Perry Nemiroff knows her stuff, and I like watching her reviews and stuff. I just don't have time. But I have on my TV, and my YouTube thing gives me, when I turn on my TV and look at the YouTube app on my TV, my screen, my smart screen, I watch the things that come up, and a lot of it's either Nerdrotic or Doomcock or Midnight's Edge, or it's a lot of the intellectual dark web, or it's movie reviews, or it's Red Letter Media. It's all the people. It's weird, and it changes every day depending on what the last video I watched was. And I watch a lot of late night talk shows the next morning. I do. I like the idea. I keep going back to this idea of Dany and Jon Snow sitting on the Iron Throne, but that seems like it's too happy for Game of Thrones. But I kind of like that idea. Loquacious Primate says, I'm sure Gary would be respectful and not even bring up Campia if he were lucky enough to get you as a guest. You have enough in common. He need not bring it up. Well, maybe. Gary's obviously a big nerd, just like I am. I think that we could absolutely have a conversation. I like Gary. I've never been really, when people have called me up and asked me to be on podcasts and things, I've done it. I have no objection to that. I think we're all in the same. We all circle and orbit the same nerd community. We're all talking about the same nerd things, and I have no objection to. That's why I go to conventions all the time. I have no objection to talking about nerd subject matter with other nerds. And when I say nerds, I would like, I shouldn't say nerds. I should say imagination connoisseurs. That was my catchphrase. I own that I don't own it, but I created that catchphrase. I started using it. And instead of nerds, which I think still has it's self-deprecating. Saying you're a nerd is self-deprecating. When you can say you're an imagination connoisseur, it shouldn't be self-deprecating. I know because we can say that now, but no, we're imagination connoisseurs. Gary is a fellow imagination connoisseur. He does his own YouTube channel. I respect that. He gets out there and he puts himself out there, and he's not afraid to do it. Square Wheel. I don't think Square Wheel, I've ever seen you here, Square Wheel. Maybe you have been, but I don't think so. First of all, thanks for supporting the channel. Thanks for supporting me. I very much appreciate it. Square Wheel says, I will always enjoy Star Wars no matter how much I disliked The Worst Jedi. Excited for episode 9. Well, Square, that's exactly how I feel. I liked Last Jedi. I thought it was interesting. It was an interesting change of pace to me. I can understand people's criticisms of it, certainly. But yes, I too love Star Wars. I've always loved Star Wars, and I go into every Star Wars movie with an open mind. Heck, I like Attack of the Clones. I don't love the prequels. I think the prequels, all three of them, are kind of bad movies, but they're good Star Wars. They're just not well told, but I like them. I do. I like the prequels for the Star Wars, but not so much the movie making. Mark C says, holy socks, I just discovered Superman the movie is out on 4K. Where you been, son? Where you been? It's also a very good looking 4K, but remember, it was shot, in the late 70s. So it doesn't look like, say, a Pixar movie looks, but it looks beautiful. It's really, really good. By the way, I watched a movie the other day that I kind of liked. Joe Cornish's The Kid Who Would Be King. I love King Arthur. It was a really well-made movie. It did not do well at all. It's out on home video. It's beautifully made and deserved a much bigger audience. I quite enjoyed it. So, yeah. By the way, this is now officially, I believe, my longest chat that I've ever done. Fenwar's here. Fenwar, you didn't say you're in New York, but I know you are. Fenwar says, Robert, should sci-fi shows have limited seasons so as not to overstay their welcome? I don't think so. I think they should. Look, as long as something is good and knows where it's going and what it's doing. That's why I like The Expanse. It's based on a series of so far 8 novels, and they know where they're going. And I don't think they've overstayed their welcome as long as it's good, as long as it's a good show. I'm really sad that Netflix canceled Eric McCormack's series Travelers. I thought Travelers was a neat little show. It wasn't perfect, but I liked it. It was really interesting. Yeah. Jennifer Jones says, Joseph, yeah, not all of them, but I've had some super negative run-ins with a few. Harloff was the worst. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sorry, that's bad. Sometimes remember, Christian Harloff doesn't need me to defend him, but a lot of the time when fans meet him, especially if it's at a Schmodown event, he's very busy. He's very worried about how it's all going to go down, and they've really put their heart and soul into it. So if you meet Harloff, tell him I said, you should give him another chance. But if he's a dick to you again, then fuck him. But give him another chance. Harloff is I think he's a good guy, and I do like him. I can't believe I keep going to Just Plain Steve saying he never saw Star Wars. You know what? That'd be fun. You see these videos. There's a video that I recently watched of people who hadn't seen Star Wars, and here's my problem with that. If you look at it, there's all of this snark happening as they're watching it, like they're kind of cracking on the movie. There's nothing that I hate more than people who watch movies and while they're watching them for the first time, they're making fun of what they're watching. Mystery Science Theater 3000 style. I hate that. That's one of my pet peeves because it means it's like the viewer suddenly becomes, they put themselves above the actual movie. And I think there's a place maybe for that if you're doing Mystery Science Theater 3000, but even that I hate because it's hard then they destroy movies to be watched on their own, like Star Crash. I don't like it. Or Danger Diabolic or This Island Earth. Just like when you've seen the Simpsons parody, you can't go back and yeah, it bothers me. Matthew Goddard says, I liked Perception. I hate it when it was canceled. I will tell Mike Sussman that, who I do. He's an Inglorious Trexperts guest as well as I. He created that show with Eric McCormack, and I will tell him you said that. I actually will tell him that you said that. Well, listen, guys, now that I've gone a long time, I've gone over 2 hours. Today, I am the sanctimonious RMB. I want to thank all of you for being here. It's been a great chat. Thank you for all the ongoing support that you give me on this channel. It's fantastic. You're going to see some really interesting changes. We're going to expand everything at the Burnettwork.net website, as you heard from Mike Bodden. I'm really going to start to make this more interactive and take it to the next level. Also, I wanted to mention my Patreon page, which doesn't have a lot of subscribers, but I'm dropping more and more videos there. You're going to start seeing a lot more original content exclusive to my Patreon subscribers, at least for the first couple of weeks. I really appreciate everyone that's been supporting me on Patreon. That has been a lot of fun. And so thanks for that. And again, the Post-Geek Singularity community, keep those letters coming. I'm getting so many interesting letters, and the letters that I read today were just amazing. And I want to thank everybody for their contributions. I'm going to start putting my favorite letters and letters I think that are worth sharing up on the website for people to read. So I think rather than just watch these chats, I'd like a place where these letters are curated, and I want people to read them, the ones I really like in particular, because I think you guys are sending me so many interesting things. Your perspectives are really interesting, and I'm going to categorize them as well on the website so people can see them who didn't see them in these chats. But I want to thank everybody for that. Go to the Burnettwork.net website. Send me things there. If you want to subscribe to this channel, please do. Please like these videos. If you like them, share them. You can find me on social media, on Twitter at BurnettRM. Find me on Instagram at RMBurnett. Or find me other places on Facebook, wherever. But I appreciate everything you guys are doing here. I'm touched by what's happening. I cannot believe tomorrow is my penultimate episode before I hit episode 100. Crazy. And I'm going to drop next week Robservations episode 2, the actual show with Diane Duane, and which I interviewed her about like 4 months ago or something. I mean to get that up because it was really interesting, and it's an evergreen show, and I love Diane Duane. And especially after the passing of Vonda McIntyre, I'm going to dedicate the episode to Vonda McIntyre. But anyway, I just want to thank all of you guys for the continued support. And as always, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. Once again, thank you for everything you guys have done and do, and this community, and thanks for being civil to one another. I very much appreciate it. And we're going to be expanding the Post-Geek Singularity community. Who knows where it's going to go? Who knows? And with that, I bid you have a better day.